So I'd like to thank you all for coming and making this event happen. I mean, if you weren't here, it would be a very interesting exercise to just sit here and talk to a room full of empty chairs. And I keep threatening that someday I will do that, or keep promising. And I'd like to thank Terry for organizing the event, for putting it on Facebook, getting the word out, booking the venue, and basically making it happen. And Terry told me a while ago that she would love to see a polyamory meditation group, or a polyamory sitting group. I'm not too sure what way you phrased it. And I thought that would be a great idea. It's something that I would love to see as well. And so that's probably when it started, or at least that's when the chain of events started. And that was some months ago when we first hit upon that idea of starting a polyamory meditation group in the Bay Area. And if not a polyamory meditation group, then at least a meditation group that is explicitly polyamorously friendly. Okay. To go to a group where you don't have to explain yourself, where you don't have to feel as though you're an odd one and an undisclosed odd one. Some of the times when I go to a polyamory support and discussion group, I go to one in Dublin where I'm currently living in Ireland. And before I moved over to Ireland, I was going to two of them here in the Bay Area, the Hayward group and the San Francisco group. And there's a great experience when you go to, well, when I go to a polyamory support and discussion group, of internally being able to let your hair down. That if somebody were to find out that you're polyamorous, it's not something that you have to explain. It's a given, and that's why it's called a polyamory support and discussion group. So in that sense, it's great to have a meditation group where you feel at home, where you feel as though you can participate on your terms, where something that's of primary importance to you or essential importance to you is accepted. So this is our gift to each other, this event. If you weren't here, there would not be much of an event. I'd just be giving a talk to empty chairs, or if I wasn't here, you'd be just looking at empty space, which would not be a bad thing to do. But we make it what it is. So the energy that you bring just by coming here, and the energy that I bring by putting on 4 layers of cotton and dressing up for the event, helps make it what it is. It's our gift to each other. And as far as I know, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, this is the first time that polyamory is being endorsed by a teacher of a mainstream religion. Now, I don't exactly see Buddhism as a religion, but I'm aware that in popular representation, if you look at news channels, it will be described as a religion. So I think this may be the first time that polyamory is endorsed by what is becoming at least a mainstream religion in the West. So that makes it somewhat, at least in my mind, a somewhat special occasion. And I'm really happy to be part of this thing called Buddhism that can be so flexible as to include things like gay marriage, same-sex unions, polyamory. It's versatile, it's adaptable. So I was saying this is our gift to each other, and it's our gift to the wider audience who may actually get some inspiration or some affirmation from the YouTube video that will be generated from this evening. It's our gift to them. And giving is one of the central parts of Buddhism. The spirit of dana, or giving, of generosity. So we're being generous with our time and with our energy. And in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, giving is one of the 6 perfections. It's the first of the 6 perfections. It's called the perfection of giving, or the perfection of dana. Now, most texts that I've come across will list 4 things that are given. But the first time I came across it was through a teacher called Sangharashikta, founder of the Western Buddhist order, renamed now to the Triratna Mahasangha, I think. But he listed 6 things that were given. And the first thing that is given is material goods or possessions. So giving food, shelter to the needy, or to the monks. In early Buddhism, all the material goods that the monks had were given through lay people who had the means to give it to them. That's food, medicine, shelter, clothing. And in that spirit, I would maybe like to suggest that if you're in a position to make a donation to help cover my living expenses kind of thing, that if you feel so moved, please do make a donation, or we have a few boxes here. That'd be terrific. And I'll be very grateful to receive and accept whatever you have to offer. But even if you do not wish to do that, just being here is a gift in and of itself. Your presence here is a gift in and of itself. So as far as I recall, the second thing that was given, or that is given, on this list of things that are given by Buddhists is hospitality. So it's one thing to give material goods, but it's another thing to give a welcoming spirit. So that's listed as one of the things that, and we have cultures where hospitality is quite significant, where we welcome strangers, we welcome visitors. We don't just say, there's your food. We do it in a welcoming attitude. And then one of the ones that I really want to highlight tonight is we give education and culture. And that's where I see tonight's event coming in that we're engaged in an exercise of consciousness raising. And we are making a contribution to our society and to our culture by adding in this element of diversity, another way of going about our lives, another way of organizing our lives, another way of having relationships. And this is, to my mind, this is not insignificant. This is quite significant. The success of the gay rights movements and the LGBT movements is a really positive indicator that we can help transform society through having a positive attitude about ourselves, through seeing it in a positive light. And on that note, I would like to say that I was particularly enamored when I came across the term polyamory. Because until then, I had always thought open relationships are the way I would like to go about my life, my relationships. But that didn't quite capture what I intended or understood by open relationships. It kind of assumes that you've got the basic monogamous model with permission to explore, sleep around, or it's open. But you have basically this single core relationship. Whereas the term polyamory means poly, many, and amory, love or affection. So it's the possibility of having more than one intimate relationship. And that is an attitude that I don't think is captured in the term open relationships. It doesn't emphasize the fact that the other relationships are important, they're real, They're sincere relationships. So I really do like the term polyamory, even though I've seen a t-shirt that says polyamory is wrong. You do not mix Greek and Latin roots. So the next thing that the Buddhists will give is life and limb. And I'm hoping that is not a consequence of tonight. I'm hoping that we don't get a mob coming around and they're going to, I won't say crucify, behead me or something, no. But there is that sense of making a sacrifice, of making a commitment, of giving something of, well, in this case it's my sweat, in 4 layers of cotton, your blood and your sweat, and putting some energy and effort into what you're doing. So the Bodhisattva, or the Buddhist practitioner, gives life and limb. Not all the time, but they're willing to. They really put their heart and soul into their giving when they're giving. The next thing that the practitioner of Buddhism gives is fearlessness. And that is where this event is so important. It's kind of an empowerment to ourselves, but also to those who will be watching and listening electronically. So the giving of fearlessness is something that comes from our practice. And like I say, I understand it to be an empowerment. It's a yes, we can do this. This is okay. And then the final thing that the practitioner or Bodhisattva gives is wisdom, or the teachings. So I think it would help all our relationships if we viewed relationships as an opportunity to give, so that it's something that I can give, rather than going into the relationship with the attitude or understanding of what can I get. And I really think that if we can shift our attitude in that way, we'll really transform our relationships and our experience of those relationships. So we're living in changing times. Lots of changes are taking place. Environmentally, catastrophe is kind of looming. Financially, I think the world has always been financially unstable, but we've really felt it over the last decade. And in the great crash of the 1930s, we felt it. So financially, we're living in changing times. And socially, we're living in changing times. Lots of new things are coming onto the social scene. Technology, and also our understanding as to what's possible in terms of our social relationships. And these changes bring with them their own kind of challenges. In the midst of all these changes, how do we find peace and stability? How do we maintain a sense of rootedness, a sense of connectedness, a sense of okayness? And for a lot of people, the changes that you and I might consider positive and healthy, a lot of people find those changes challenging. Such as equal rights for gay people, same-sex marriages, and polyamorous relationships. So what's good to us can be quite a heavy challenge to other people. It's a challenge to their worldview, to the worldview that they are holding on to and that they want to make universal or maintain as a universal. So there is this little bit of a conflict between those who want the change to happen and those who don't. I find a quote from Gandhi to be very inspiring, very challenging. He says, be the change you want to see in the world. And when I read it, it's on one of these random quotes that I send out in my emails. Every so often it comes up. Be the change that you want to see in the world. I feel as though he has thrown down the gauntlet to me. He is giving me a challenge. Can you be the kind of person that you want to see in the world? And that's where we come into the giving of fearlessness. Can we be fearless? Can we live the life that we feel is appropriate and right for us to live? It's not that we want everybody to do it. It's not that we expect everybody to do it, but that we want to do it because it feels right for us. So to be the change that we want to see in the world. So change is one of the hallmarks, I think, of Western society. Ever since it became established in our democratic systems, there is the idea that through dialogue and debate, we can figure out a more acceptable way of doing things. We can accommodate more people. We can accommodate more diversity. There's an underlying premise that if we prohibit something in Western society, it has to be rationally justified. So underlying that is, how do we guarantee people's freedom to live the lives that they choose? And given the fact that a lot of people do not want to live the way we want to live, and they may be hostile or averse to it, then the way to create the space in which society will accommodate us is through debate and example, and demonstrating and illustrating that we're not actually a threat to other people. But change does create anxiety in people. So we need to be sensitive to that anxiety that other people may experience because we're doing things in a way that they find threatening. We can never set the world up perfectly the way we want it and then keep it that way. Sooner or later, something is going to change. And it just so happens that today, we're part of the change. We're creating a movement which is growing. I think the last figure I read was 5 to 10% of the population, and I don't know what it's going to be in 5 or 10 years' time. What proportion of the population will identify as being poly? So we can never set something up and say, this is the way it's always going to be. There's always going to be something that will bring about change. And part of Buddhist practice is becoming comfortable with the fact that things change. How do we find our peace and stability in the midst of change and in the midst of challenge? So I don't think it's true to say that we all know what polyamory is and Buddhism. I mean, we may have our ideas, and I don't feel as though I'm really in a position to give a crystal clear definition of what they are. But I'll give what my take on each is, how I understand them. So see polyamory as being a positive acceptance that an intimate relationship is not necessarily restricted to one person, that there may be in your life more than one intimate relationship. And it doesn't mean that there has to be, it just means that you are open to being, or that you may be in no relationship at the time, but that you feel as though it's okay for other people to have more than one intimate relationship. And with that goes a certain ethical responsibility of honesty and not cheating. It's not as though we can have multiple intimate relationships and not telling our partners that we have other partners. So it's an embrace or an acceptance of the possibility of multiple intimate relationships. I actually think Wikipedia does a better job than I just did. Buddhism, I don't see it as a religion, but I'm aware that it looks like a religion because we wear this kind of robes and stuff, and we engage in ceremonies and rituals, and we've got bells and whistles, and offer incense, and it looks like a religion. And maybe nobody really believes me when I say these are just nice things to do. They create an atmosphere, they create an ambience that is very conducive to meditation and being present. And the more present the participants are, the better the ceremony and the ritual. So I'd see it more as a philosophy, or as it's often described, a path. It's described as the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's a path that is a noble response to the conditions that we face as human beings. And those conditions are primarily the conditions of impermanence or change. So we know that sooner or later we're going to grow old, we're going to grow ill, and we're going to die. At least until the scientists unlock the DNA code and grant us immortality. But for now, we're all going to die. So given that, what is a noble response to our predicament? Somebody said it to me recently. They've left something too late. And I felt that if they do it now, it's a little bit like giving up smoking when you're on the Titanic. But it's never really too late to start reflecting on the fact that we're on the Titanic. We're all on a sinking ship. And what is a noble response to that predicament? And that to me is what Buddhism is. It's a suggestion that here is a noble response. If you want to look at it, examine it, and see if you resonate with it, see if you consider it to be a noble response. So I'm looking forward to the formation or the emergence of a Pali Sangha. Sangha is a term for community in Buddhism. It's the community of spiritual practitioners, or the community of people who are traveling the path. Which path? The Noble Eightfold Path. Okay. So there we have it. Buddhism is a path. And I'm optimistic that the Sangha, such a Sangha, will help establish poly-friendliness and poly-awareness in other Sanghas. So it may be that you're a Zen practitioner, or you're a Tibetan practitioner, or you're a Vipassana practitioner, and you're going along to the various centers. You have your Sangha, you have your community, your fellow practitioners along this Noble Eightfold Path. But you can't clearly see yourself as being represented by it. So you feel as though maybe you're not quite the fit. But I think this formation, if we do manage to do it, and I think we probably will, that this will lead to putting polyamory and Buddhist practice on the map. So similar to the gay rights movement, polyamory will become more and more acceptable. So just to say that we're going to a group, a meditation group, which is a polyamorous Buddhist group, helps put it into people's consciousness that there is a thing called polyamory and that normal Buddhist practitioners go there. It's not something to be afraid of, and it's not something to keep hidden. So this group helps to put it on the map, and it also gives us a place to go where we can, as I said at the beginning, let our internal hair down. I have to say internal hair because so it helps integrate polyness into our society. So the Sangha is one of the three jewels in Buddhism. So there's three precious things in Buddhism. There's the Buddha, there's the Dharma, which is the teaching of the Buddha, and there's the Sangha. So the role of community, the role of the support of fellow practitioners is given quite a high status in Buddhism. Yes, if we're sitting on a desert island, we can still practice. We can practice in an isolated kind of way, but there is a reason for giving value to the role of community. The three jewels are also known as the three refuges. So we take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha. And we're taking refuge from the dissatisfactoriness or the meaninglessness of life. Taking refuge from the humdrumness of life. Or just taking refuge from the fact that we're on the Titanic. Does it make sense to give up smoking when you're on the Titanic? So having a sense of community, since we're taking refuge from the dissatisfactoriness of life, we're taking refuge from the meaninglessness of life, that means that community is one of the ways in which we can find meaning. Okay? So if you're on the Titanic and somebody says, I'm thinking of giving up the cigarettes, I've been planning this for months and I was going to do it as soon as we land, and somebody says that to you and you say to them, well, give them up now and I'll give you my support. That makes it meaningful. So isn't it just enough to have a Buddhist Sangha? You know, you may like Tibetan Buddhism, you may like Vipassana Buddhism, you may like Zen Buddhism. Isn't that just enough? Why do we need to go to a polyamory specific group for Buddhism? I've been on many retreats, and what we call in Zen a sesshin. The sesshin would be similar to the Vipassana 10-day retreat. And when you immerse yourself in the practice, it really doesn't matter who is practicing with you, because there's such a strong sense of we're on the same boat, we're doing this together. But still, I have to contrast or reflect upon the fact that when I go to a polyamory support and discussion group, there is this sense of I can breathe a little bit more easily now. I can let my hair down internally. You keep smiling at the dog, is it?
I'm smiling at you too.
Oh, okay. I was thinking you're... I was getting some encouragement from your smiles, and then, oh, he's smiling at the dog, not me.
Ain't that Zen?
Yeah, the dog has Buddha nature, even if I don't. So I think in this vein of why do we need a Pali Sangha, It's a little bit like the LGBT meditation groups that have sprung up or that have formed. Why do they need it? What is the value of all this? And I think it's that in such a group we can let our hair down, we can be with like-minded people, we can feel the affirmation of a core value that is not affirmed in the broader society. Although it's more and more so for the LGBT people, I think, becoming more so. But there's still a long way to go. And I think all minorities feel this lack of representation when they go into a particular kind of group. Do I fit in here? Do I belong here? And yes, ideally, if you're going to a Zen group, all that really matters is that it's a Zen group. Or if you're going to a Vipassana group, all that really matters is that it's a Vipassana group. But at the same time, we want to feel that there is room for us, the things that we identify with. There's room for us in this group. That if I was found out, I wouldn't be considered an outsider. So we want to feel that our ethnicity, our orientation, and our background are accepted by the majority, and that the majority's underlying assumptions are not taken for granted or assumed to be universal. So, in his book, The Fear of Freedom, Erich Fromm talks about isolation and how isolation is probably the most difficult thing for a human being to bear. But he talks about, in particular, moral isolation. So we can be in a group of people and feel, he calls it morally isolated. That there is nobody here who really shares our worldview or our perspective. And on the other hand, we can be in a very isolated condition. We can be in a cave meditating, or we can be in solitary confinement in prison or lost on a desert island, and still feel connected because we know that there are other people who share our worldview. So that is an indication as to how important it can be to meet with like-minded people. It gives a clear message that I'm okay after all. So what is the how does this new way of seeing relationships compare or fit in with Buddhism? It's what I call an avant-garde perspective. It's at the leading edge of relationship understanding. One thing that I see happening with polyamory support and discussion groups, and as it becomes more accepted in society, that it will translate into art, that its iconography will develop and that its way of representing itself will develop in art forms. And I think we've encountered some positive TV programs where they actually treat polyamory fairly. And that gave me a little bit of concern. If the media is so friendly to it already, I'm a little bit suspicious. And I kind of think that maybe the corporations see some kind of economic advantage. You know, if you can actually get this Valentine thing and exponentially multiply it exponentially, then you're onto a good thing. So that can be reassuring. that if it has a corporate advantage, if it has an economic advantage, then we might be fairly quick in getting it accepted in society. But fitting in with Buddhism, one of the great things to me about Buddhism, as I said at the beginning, is its flexibility. It doesn't have a dogmatic view of relationships. This is how a sexual relationship should look. It tends to take whatever form society has. So in early Buddhism, polygamy was accepted. And so Buddhism didn't say you shouldn't do that. It didn't really say monogamy is the way. So it accepts whatever relational values are there. But it does have the precept of do not misuse sexuality. So we'll be looking at that in a moment. It doesn't have a dogmatic view as to how marriage should be. And it changes. The form of Buddhism and Buddhist practice will change as it goes from culture to culture. And so here in the West, we don't have a single culture. Or if we do, it's a culture of accepting diversity and alternatives. So we're a culture within a culture. And so if we were living in a separate country and polyamory was the way things are done, and Buddhism arrived, it would say, okay, that's the way things are done, and we get on with it. So here in the West, where we have these alternatives, Buddhism has to say yes to the different things that are there, that are going on. So I think already in some Buddhist countries there has been some same-sex marriages officiated by Buddhist priests. And I'd be quite happy to do that here. I would also be quite happy to facilitate a polyamorous commitment ceremony if it's legal. I've heard that in some countries like Canada it isn't legal. You're actually breaking the law if you perform a ceremony that validates or seems to validate a polyamorous marriage. That's what I heard.
That is true.
Yeah?
Wow.
Okay. So I'm happy to do it if I'm not breaking the law, because I don't really want to end up in conflict with the authorities. But I'm quite happy to advocate that the law should be changed. So Buddhism is not setting out an agenda as to what marriage, what form that should take, or what kind of, how you should live your life in that sense. It's a path or a system for dealing with what we call dukkha, this dissatisfactoriness, the discontentment that we feel with life from time to time. And it's a way, therefore, of transcending the relativity of our life or the particularity of our life so that we can see the universality in that relativity. So if your life looks like this, you might think it would be better if it looked like that. And if it looks like that, you might be thinking it'd be better if it looked like something else.